Thank you, Simon, for the very kind introduction, and thanks as well to the Global Ethical Finance Initiative for creating the opportunity for me to speak today. As Inger just said, we're at a critical point in terms of delivering and developing the sustainable finance capabilities to promote the net zero transition that we have all committed to. And as we also heard from President Hoyer, uh, looking at the position of the European Investment Bank Group as the biggest multilateral financial institution in the world, the very ambitious targets that they've set in their climate action plan is inspiring, and I think provides a very, very good underpinning to a lot of the rest of what we're talking about. I wanted to run through a few of the things that we're focused on here at Standard Chartered Bank in our journey to net zero. The first is just to comment on a research paper that we've just released called Carbon Dated. This is a body of work that we've done on the impact of multinationals' net zero intentions and the impact that that will have in turn on their suppliers across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. The climate crisis is the defining challenge of our generation. And to avoid catastrophic and irreversible harm to our prosperity, society, and health, global greenhouse gas emissions must be cut by approximately 45% by 2030 and then fall to zero by mid-century. These are familiar refrains. That's why Standard Chartered has committed to achieve net zero emissions from our own operations by 2030 and from our financing by 2050. We're doing this working in partnership with our clients at every step. We believe we have a unique role to play in accelerating action on net zero in the markets we call home across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. So in support of this ambition, we're developing a detailed roadmap that will guide us and guide our clients through a thoughtful net zero transition. Now, with support from external partners, we're working to develop and apply methodologies and use these to articulate targets and timelines towards net zero financed emissions, a particularly thorny topic. Now, demonstrating our sincerity, progress against these plans will guide not just our directors' pay, but through the integration into our group scorecards, will inform compensation-related decisions of many across the organization. So we are indeed putting our money where our mouth is. Building on our ongoing engagement and collaboration, we'll put our net zero transition plan to an advisory vote at our 2022 annual general meeting, giving all shareholders an opportunity to assess our progress. Now, clearly along the way, we'll be consulting with key shareholders and other members of civil society, NGOs, etc., to test the plans that we're putting in place. This is something that we're taking extremely seriously, and we hope that we can contribute to a substantial body of work that's going on across the financial sector to understand both how we can measure, how we can apportion, and then ultimately transition greenhouse gas emissions coming from our clients' portfolios or the companies in which we invest. The early signs of progress on this quest for net zero transition are visible. So alongside our refreshed suite of position statements, setting out minimum standards for clients on topics including climate change, in May 2021, so just a month ago, we released our first two transition frameworks, one on oil and gas and the second on metal and mining, looking at specific client sectors that are both big emitters and also have historically been a meaningful part of our portfolio. These set out in some detail the areas and technologies required to achieve the transition to a lower carbon economy, and where we believe we can play a specific role. We'll be releasing further transition papers and frameworks over the course of 2021, as well as ongoing research to help shape thinking and progress on the net zero agenda. So our first research report this year, or earlier this year, was Zeronomics, and we showed that companies were not transitioning fast enough to net zero. They cited a number of reasons, including lack of finance and the financing that's required for them to transition their own businesses. But they were hopeful at the same time that they could delay the transition until some of these capabilities were put in place and until they had built the organizational capacity to effect this change. As time has moved on, things are improving. So we've seen a pickup in the speed at which these perceptions are changing. A growing number of the companies that we speak to are joining the UN's race to net zero and calling for ambitious government action at COP26. And against this backdrop, our new research report launched today, Carbon Dated as I mentioned, shows the revolutionary effect that net zero will have on supply chains and the potential opportunities and impacts that could result. So the global drive towards net zero is inextricably connected to supply chains. The vast web of international suppliers, the foundation of the global economy in many ways, accounts for almost 3/4 of multinational companies, MNCs, carbon emissions. So as MNCs ramp up their net zero plans, they're starting to look at their supply chains to do much of the heavy lifting. And this is inevitable, given that's 2/3 of what they're taking responsibility for. The speed at which these suppliers can decarbonize will be crucial in achieving the aims of the Paris Agreement and mitigating the worst effects of climate change. A few stats. 96% of multinational corporations in our research have set net zero targets, and 2/3 are targeting supply chain emissions as their first step to decarbonizing. The focus on supply chain emissions is shifting the net zero pressure from west to east, and in some ways from north to south, and from big companies to small companies. So according to our research, this creates opportunities and threats. The opportunity to be part of an exclusive market worth 1.6 trillion US dollars for decarbonized suppliers in 12 markets alone, China, India, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, Nigeria, South Africa, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Kenya. We noted that over half of multinational companies are also willing to pay more for goods and services which have lesser climate impact. But of course, the flip side of the opportunity is the threat for those who are either unwilling or unable to move at pace, and the pace is necessary to exploit the opportunity. This requires collaboration with their MNC customers and in many cases with governments. So 78% of multinationals say they will start removing slow to transition suppliers by 2025. 15% of MNCs have already started this process. This will be seismic for many of the small companies, in particular in developing economies. Larger companies need to work with their suppliers, particularly those in emerging markets, to ensure that net zero plans are financially viable, mutually beneficial, and adequately understood. Governments also need to rapidly accelerate their own net zero plans, particularly for energy generation, or run the risk of making their businesses uncompetitive due to the carbon intensity of their electricity grids. And the financial sector must also play its part in encouraging more sustainable supply chains and by developing innovative products and solutions designed to aid the transition to net zero. All actors need to address this in a collaborative way. And the two areas that we identified most clearly through our research is the current positions being an insufficient knowledge of what the net zero transition means and inadequate data. These are areas we have been pursuing for some time, such as through our academic partnership on climate with Imperial College, and via our early endorsement and continued championing of effective climate disclosures through the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. The markets and sectors that require the most financing to transition to low-carbon business models are often left out of green finance altogether. In emerging markets, they also tend to be sectors that are essential for the livelihoods and economic growth of the local economies. And at the same time, these are the sectors and the regions that will be most affected by the consequences of climate change. So the need to address this collaboration to help our clients and others in the less developed economies of the world is absolutely crucial, both for MNC's own net zero transition plans, but also for the economic health of local markets and then the broader world. So we've long been active in mobilizing climate finance to these parts of the world and sectors. In 2020 alone, we mobilized $18.4 billion towards clean technology, and our Sustainable Finance Impact Report demonstrates the disproportionate impact of tackling climate change across our footprint in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, with new solar financing in India displacing 7 times as much carbon dioxide as equivalent projects in France, given the existing energy mix. So, said in other terms, the impact that we can have getting the proper sustainable finance pipeline working in developing markets is much greater than we could have diverting the same financing into developed markets. But the challenge of getting there in the first place and the challenge of those companies and those countries to receive and obtain the financing is acute. We are continuing to develop new solutions, such as our sustainable trade finance proposition, designed to help companies implement more sustainable practices across their ecosystems and build resilient supply chains. We have to work together across the supply chain to ensure it's decarbonized in a way that delivers shared prosperity across the world. The global economy will be 3% smaller by 2050 as a result of the lack of climate resilience. But the impacts of this will be disproportionately felt. Clearly, much greater impact in Africa, for example, where the economies there are likely to experience around 4 times greater GDP impact than what we would expect in North America. So we're committing to helping the MNCs work with their supply chains to achieve their net zero goals, and in doing so, pushing ourselves to net zero finance emissions by 2050. Of course, we can only achieve net zero if our clients get to net zero themselves. The decarbonization of global supply chains is crucial in achieving a just net zero economy. Decarbonization is vital for the survival of the planet, but a vibrant trade ecosystem is essential for managing an interconnected global economy. Our report shows how these two imperatives will interrelate in the coming decades and the important role Standard Chartered and the financial sector can play in delivering this. Thank you.